It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, all right. Welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I got a little, close that off there. A little technical problems here. Sorry about that. Little hectic tonight. Got a couple little problems up there. Couple of things I want to get to here. First of all, we had a little scheduling mix-up today, and I wanted to have John Iverson on after Brian O'Neill and the Alphonta story, because John Iverson is a survivor of the standoff at Wounded Knee. And as you know, on January 20th, we're going to be inaugurating a new president, a great orange leader of our country. So we're hoping that while Obama is still in office, that we can get through to him and we can get clemency for Leonard Peltier from the American Indian Movement. He was one of 40 people at Wounded Knee, I think it was 1973, 1974, around that time, maybe 75, who were defending their community against an armed attack by outsiders. And Mr. Peltier wound up being convicted to 2 life sentences. So we're hoping that we can get our audience tonight to really pull out all the stops and to contact, they want to contact Jerry Brown, the governor of California. They want you to contact the White House and leave a statement there. And also, too, I believe the other two are Nancy Pelosi. And let me see, I try and find this real quick for you. And who's that other one? Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer, those kind of people in California. These are the ones that they're hoping we can reach out to. But wherever you live, get a hold of your representative and nag them. You can email or call the White House and try and get some clemency for Leonard Peltier. He's over 70 years old. He's like 73, 74 years old. He's not a young man anymore. And he's also not in well health while he's there in this maximum security prison. Let's see, how old is he here? I got my computer's running so slow right now, it's not even funny. 72 years old. Okay. By coincidence, tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have as our guest King Tone, Antonio Fernandez, who was the leader of the Imperial Latin Kings, which was a New York City street gang. They were revolutionaries, as he likes to describe himself. And I was talking to him today, or maybe it was yesterday. He's a fun guy. He's very personable guy, very very easy to talk to. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with King Tone from the Imperial Latin Kings tomorrow. And I mentioned to him, he was like sizing me up. He says, "Well, tell me about your show. You know, who's the audience?" That's why I started telling him. I said, "Well, we're doing a show about Leonard Peltier." He says, "Oh, I met Leonard Peltier. I met him in prison in Florida. They're both in the same prison, Coleman, I think it is, U.S. Penitentiary in Florida." And he says, and he told me, he says, he was encouraging me as a young man. He's an older revolutionary, and I'm a younger revolutionary. So that's tomorrow. We have King Tone from the Imperial Latin Kings. He's going to be telling us about his life with the Latin Kings, then his life in prison. How he's gotten out. I know he works at a youth jail right now as kind of a motivational speaker type, and he's got a business, and he spent time in South America, Venezuela, different countries. So King Tone tomorrow. I'm hoping I can get him to do a show on Awake Radio. Hey, by the way, got a big announcement. WakeRadio.us. The YouTube channel is up. Okay? So find that. Find the link on Facebook, on the Awake Radio official channel on Facebook. Find the YouTube channel and subscribe to that. We're going to have really, really, really big things coming up. Like I said, we got a new host, Doug Campbell, with the Dallas Action. People are really enjoying that. I'm hoping to get King Tone on the station. A lot of big stuff coming up. One of the things coming up is that, and this is big, we're going to have an Awake Radio Spreaker channel, okay? And it'll probably be a 24-hour channel. So the chat room will be open all the time. You can go there all the time and chat. All you people will love to hang out in the chat room. Okay? Also, there's a new feature on Spreaker, and I want you to open up your eyes and take a look for this. There's some type of new monetization feature on there where they're kind of playing some kind of ads that you can click on these ads or something like that. So look around and find those, okay? And then do what you got to do. You know what to do when you find them, okay? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, once you look for them, and then you find them, you know what to do. This is a big deal because we get a lot more listeners. All the shows that we play on iHeart and iTunes, all that stuff is about to be monetized. So we have 100 times easily the listeners on iHeart and iTunes and Stitcher and all that stuff like that than we have on YouTube. So if we can get even twice or double or 3 times what we make on YouTube, this will be a whole new ball game for this station and for this host. We can really put some things together here. Get some real work done here. So keep your eyes out for that monetization. Keep your eyes out for that Spreaker channel. All of our hosts are going to be on iHeart. They're going to be on iTunes. They're going to be on Stitcher. They're going to be on Spreaker. They're going to be on YouTube. It's a big deal. Big change. All these hosts are going to be on 20 times the stations that they're on right now. 20 times the audience. Easily. Without even trying. So big news. So like I said, tomorrow we have King Tone from the Imperial Latin Kings. This week I have a show I'm taping with Bill Kennison, who's the brother of Sam Kennison. And they traveled together. They were in a tent ministry together, like I was. And then they did stand-up comedy together. And he was like his manager and stuff like that. So we have Bill Kennison coming on. We're doing a show also, too, about baby Jessica, the little girl who fell into the well. And her life story. This is about 40 years ago. We're going to be doing a story both with an author that wrote a book about the story and also baby Jessica's father. We're going to be doing 2 shows on it. It's a lot of good stuff. Now, I had notes I was going to do a live show, like I do every Friday night. But we're able to get John Iverson on, so I'm going to try and get him on the phone right now. He's charging up his phone, so I'm kind of stalling a bit. But I wanted to say a couple of things about Ryan O'Neal, who we just interviewed an hour ago. He started at 7 o'clock. The Pizzagate YouTuber who was threatened, according to him, by James Alisfontis, the owner of Ping Pong Pizza. Since we've taped that show, he wants you to know that he's taken down the website pizzagear.com where he was selling those T-shirts, and he's going to refund all the money, okay? So, because he doesn't want any kind of questions about his motivations. What's important that I want you to know about that show, and I had a whole thing planned tonight, and I'll probably record it tomorrow and put it in the member section or put it up someplace, is that if you notice in my conversation with Mr. O'Neal, we described that we had done that we weren't planning on doing an interview, okay? I heard his situation, and I reached out to him, and I said, listen, if you're being threatened, I'm a private investigator. I get involved in a lot of stuff. Let me take a statement so in case anything happens, we have a record, okay? We did this off the air. This wasn't a plan for a show. And I want you to understand that I do that kind of thing a lot, okay? A lot goes on here behind the scenes that you don't hear on the air. I don't do a show all the time about all the stuff we're working on here behind the scenes. It's a lot of stuff we're working on. And I can cull from this information I get, okay, I don't always do a show. They don't always come on the record on the air, but I got them on the record off the air. Okay, and then I can come on the air and tell you about things that are going on, things that I know from my knowledge that I can share with you. But, without having a witness. Okay? A witness on record. You have me on record. And I got the information on record if I need it. So anyway, I'm trying to get that across to you, but I got a whole show planned for you about that, because we're going to get into the whole thing about this stuff with this intelligence report that was done by this MI6 agent in the UK. And I got a whole lot to say about that, okay? Ton of stuff and all kinds of stuff I want to talk to you about. One more thing I wanted to say real quick, and I'll get it out to you, is you hear me complaining about stuff, issues I'm dealing with here, and a lot of people seem to think that the problem is like YouTube comments and emails and comments on Facebook, and say, well, Ed, just have somebody screen. Well, I'm telling you, the stuff we're dealing with is in real life. We're dealing with real life problems and real life issues that go way beyond the comments. I'm not worried about comments, or nonsense. We need a whole show for that. So let's see if we can get our friend here, John Iverson, on the phone and try and get this interview going. Now, he's charging up his phone. I'm hoping it's charged by now. Okay. Let's see. Your guess is as good as mine. It's ringing. Okay, we didn't get the voicemail. John himself is about 75 years old.
Hello, Ed.
John Iverson, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm ready to go.
Okay, we are live on the air. Okay,
great.
Thank you so much. We tried to get you this afternoon, but we had a little scheduling mix-up, and I know you've been working 24 hours a day trying to get this story out. Am I right?
Well, 20 maybe.
Okay. All right. So, John Iverson, tell us about yourself. Who is John Iverson?
Well, I'm John Iverson, spelled with an E because I'm half Norwegian. And my other extractions are Acadian, which means French-Canadian, from Prince Edward Island, and Anishinaabe. My grandmother grew up on, well, I don't think anyone really wants to call them reservations anymore. We call them nations. And in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we call what other people call reservations bands. So I am enrolled in the Minnesota Chippewa tribe Boys Fort Band at Net Lake. We had the whole arrowhead of Minnesota at one time, and in 1854, it was all bargained away, and we ended up with three bands: the Grand Portage Band up near the California border on Lake Superior, the Fond du Lac Band, which is near Cloquet, Minnesota, which is where Jessica Lang from. And Jessica Lang, if you're listening, we could use your help, and your brothers too, the hockey player. And then Boys Fort, and very strange. There's a Boys Fort Band at Net Lake and a Boys Fort Band at Lake Vermilion. And that's Tower, Minnesota, and Orr, Minnesota. Net Lake is up by International Falls. And I don't know the history of that, of why we got two different pieces of territory 60 or 70 miles away from each other. The Lake Vermilion part is sort of thriving because that's where the casino is, and they were smart. Besides having the casino, they built a world-class golf course, and have a lake there.
Well, John,
However,
let me ask you this.
That's Lake Vermilion.
How old are you, John?
Finish up. Let me finish up.
Okay.
Then at Net Lake is poor. There's not much development there, and a good thing the tribal government has put more money into Net Lake. And I want to say, for wild rights connoisseurs, Net Lake, Minnesota our band is the only body of water where Indian land, native land, totally surrounds the lake. And it is said that the Net Lake Band of Chippewa has the best wild rice in the world. Giving a little promo for the wild rice consumers.
So John,
and let me
ask you a question. How old are you?
I am 67. I'll be 68 in a month.
68. Okay, so you're a young man. Okay, now, and you were at Wounded Knee at this event that we're going to be talking about, where 40 men were defending the land, the area there, right? This little town. But Leonard Peltier and another gentleman wound up in prison for it. And you were there, correct?
No, the Wounded Knee itself took place. It started. I called it my 24th birthday present. It started around February 25th, 1973. Leonard's shooting that he was involved in took place almost 2.5 years later, on June 25th, 1975.
Okay.
So they're two different events.
Okay, I wasn't familiar with that. Okay, and believe it or not, I was a teenager when this was going on. I was aware of it at the time. Now, so tell me.
I know. I talked to some people who were 2 years old.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's a long story, but when one of these events happened, I guess it was 75, but it's hard to believe because I would have been like a freshman or sophomore in high school. But I know some guys that I knew from Washington Square Park were loading up their cars with guns to go down there at one of these events. So they said, hey, we got to go down there. So, but the thing is now, describe what happened. What were the events leading up to the arrest of Leonard Peltier?
Okay. Well, I guess it starts with the formation of AIM, the American Indian Movement, which was started in Minneapolis by Clyde Belcourt and his brother Vernon Belcourt. And I think Russell Means and Dennis Banks were soon in on it. But, it must have been Belcourt and Banks because they lived in Minnesota. AIM started in Minneapolis, took on much of the same activities as the Black Panther Party. They had the Little Red Schoolhouse, which was akin to, Panthers never had that, but they serve food, the Black Panther breakfast program. And then what they would do is follow the police around, and they would be armed. And in areas where there had been a lot of police brutality or actually police murders, they would get out with their guns. They'd never fire them. But it would sort of back down the police in confrontations. And that's what the Black Panther Party would do too. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale would follow people around, or follow the police around. Every cop car needed to be followed around, and they were able to do one or two. And that's where the slogan arose. One of the 10 points of the Black Panther Party program, I presume it was a point of AIM, that there be community control of police. That police live in the neighborhood, work in the neighborhoods where they lived. And so, it would be real. It would be like most other countries in the world where the police don't live 40 miles away in a suburb. They live right there in the area that in other countries they do serve and protect. But here it's what we used to say, it's called swerve and neglect. Now, that's not to say that police in other countries, are told by the powers that be, you have to quell this demonstration at this place. But on an every day-to-day basis, in the rest of the world, there really aren't police shootings of the magnitude, police shootings both ways, police shooting people and people shooting police, but usually the police start it. There's no other country like this in the world where that happens. This is a very violent society we live in. I was told in Argentina when the Newtown events happened, people said, your country is crazy. It's nearly impossible to get a gun here. And indeed, there was one year there had been 400 gun murders in Chicago. The same period in Buenos Aires metro area, 13 million people, 51 murders, 48 of which were knife stabbings.
Yeah, John,
So we are gun crazy.
I think you slept through it today, but there was just a Department of Justice press conference about Chicago here today, talking about how the Chicago Police Department is guilty of all these civil rights violations, and the police training out there is so abysmal that they're actually watching police training videos that are 30, 40 years old. And there was a big press conference about that today. But the thing is, now we've only got a few days to save Leonard Peltier, because when the great orange leader comes in, there's no way he's going to give clemency to Leonard Peltier.
No.
So we have to really be
not
serious.
if he's calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. I thought, some of these right-wingers may have this romantic thing about Native Americans, but he doesn't care about that.
Absolutely not.
When he calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas, that's his opinion of us. That's someone calling me squaw man, or someone telling me I'm going to burn down your teepee, or Nazis calling me a mutt,
Right.
Same thing.
So, so we don't have much hope. So, but we have, we have a week. So God bless us so we can get this done. One thing you can do is you can contact the White House, okay? Another thing is contact the Attorney General Loretta Lynch and her phone number.
Why don't we do this intermittently throughout the interview,
right,
so that people now can get a pen and pencil ready, and in a minute or two, I'll give out Obama's information. A lot of it has disappeared because he shut down his phone lines, etc.
Right.
But maybe we should start with so we know AIM came, the Black Panther Party was the example that was followed by AIM in the Native American community, by the Young Lords in New York City, primarily Puerto Ricans. Juan Gonzalez of Democracy Now! Was once in the Young Lords. Brown Berets in the southwest of the United States. I lived in Albuquerque when the leader of the Brown Berets was murdered by the police. I don't know. I presume there was never a trial, and I want to talk about there's never been trials of people, over 100 murders during the 3.5 years of terror at Pine Ridge, complete terror. I told someone, you think Ferguson, Missouri, and you think it lasted 3.5 years with no press coverage, and you have the only example of a fascist state within the United States were those 3.5 years at Pine Ridge, and believe me, it was horrible. And it had the open support, not tacit support, but open support of Richard Nixon and J. Edgar. Now we know him as Mary in a Red Dress, because it came out that he would go to transsexual and gay parties wearing a red dress. Hoover, who was an awful man, I wondered if he was able to be himself at the time, if he would have been so horrible. But, so where are we?
Well,
John,
the thing to remember, John, is we only got about 35 minutes left, okay? And I'm gonna wipe out all the commercials. We're not gonna play any commercials. So why don't we try and focus on Peltier and what happened with him and his trial? And because Amnesty International has this on the list of unjust trials. There were 140,000 FBI documents that were not turned over to the defense. There's no doubt.
And the most important one was the ballistics evidence was not turned over in the trial, and the ballistics evidence would have proved that the bullets that fired the gun, that they are saying murdered the FBI agents. Well, the government also says any Indian was killed. Now, that's a big difference in semantics right away. So the most important thing that was withheld was the ballistics evidence. The bullets that killed these two agents were not from Leonard's gun, and they never presented that.
Amazing.
And then they fabricated tons of other information.
Well, let's start. What led up to this event? Even before this event, there was a lot of tension in that community with these goons, right? These goons were coming around causing trouble, and that was their name, goons. They named themselves.
Well, they called them, they labeled them the Goon Squad. In the year before, in 1972, Richard Wilson was elected tribal chairman. And, everyone just said, well, we'll see what happens. Well, Wilson started firing quite adequate people, one of them being Wounded Knee leader Ellen Mooskamp, who was a public health nurse. She lost her job. He began just firing people right and left and hiring his friends. Friends who, perhaps like Trump's new cabinet, were not qualified to do their jobs. And he basically, with the whole police force, fired them all unless they gave, allegiance to Richard Wilson. During this whole time, Richard Wilson was in the process of selling an eighth of, the Pine Ridge Nation, then we would say reservation, an eighth of the reservation that bordered on the Black Hills, to give the Black Hills, he sold an eighth of the reservation while he was there. And I think the money went directly to Richard Wilson. So that happened. And so 3 months later, I think the tribal council was evenly split between supporters of Wilson and supporters of everyone else. There was an impeachment trial called. And the judge who was going to do the impeachment trial, he was either sick or called away, I don't know. But for some technical reason, Wilson got to choose the judge of his own re-impeachment trial. In labor terms, this is like you're going to a labor mediation and management has chosen who will mediate the goings on. So that's absurd, right?
Oh, it's great if you could pull that off, but if you're on the other side, it's absurd, yeah.
Yeah. So it's totally absurd. And, this was when already many people had lost their jobs, people were getting threats, maybe one or two people killed already. And the night after the impeachment trial lasted 2 days, on the night after it ended, there was a meeting. And Wounded Knee happened 2 days later. But four elder women, basically were responsible. They stood up, they had talked amongst themselves before, and they said, this can no longer go on. We have to act, and we have to call in the American Indian movement. These women were Ellen Mooskamp, who I mentioned before, who was fired from her public health nurse job, Gladys Bissonette, a respected elder, Sally Hatt, Sally and Gladys were really old, in their 90s. And Lou Bean, who was younger, but she was over 55. You got to be 55 to be an elder. So these four women said, they just put their foot down and said, we have to do this. And so everyone went along. You could not, they had to. It's a matrilineal society. And when four older women get up and say something, everyone listens.
John, wasn't there something, too, about these goons going around and pretty much kicking in people's doors and demanding that they sign over mineral rights?
Oh, burning down people's houses,
right.
Kicking down people's doors, at the very least, chopping down their mailbox at the end of the road, harassing their kids, harassing relatives. It was, think of Germany.
Right.
It was just as bad as that. And no one realizes it, but it really was, to set that context.
And then that day, what was it that brought the police to you call it the reservation, but I think it's called Pine Ridge. Well, what brought the police, the FBI agents, what brought them to that community that day?
Okay, well, the AIM started, AIM occupied the BIA building, Bureau of Indian Affairs, in November 1972. And then they sort of went to the Midwest, everybody. And in January, I believe, in 1973, an incident that set it off was the death of Raymond Yellow Thunder. It was in a bar right across the border in Nebraska. I do not remember the town. Raymond Yellow Thunder was in a bar, and all of a sudden, the white people in the bar attacked him, made him dance naked, shooting bullets at his feet, and then, stuffed his dead body in the trunk of a car and left it there. I mean, this was just a regular Joe going to a bar. And that brought almost everyone who was at the BIA building. People started coming to South Dakota because they knew something would occur. Right before, there had been demonstrations around Raymond Yellow Thunder's death and other deaths that had occurred in Rapid City, I believe, or in Custer. But I think it was Rapid City. I recall the film being, more city-like at government buildings. And there were riots. There were fires started. I think the National Guard had been brought in by that time. So that's occurring around the Raymond Yellow Thunder death. And meanwhile, within 40 miles, there's Pine Ridge, and the people saying AIM was already in the area, so they said, we've got to call in AIM, and we have to make a stand. So I think that trial ended on February 20th. I'm not sure the date, because I was told Wounded Knee started on February 23rd. I mistakenly thought, to my ego, it started on my birthday. So that was about February 25th of 1973. And the government thought that they were going to take over the administrative buildings at Pine Ridge. But I later found out, due to circumstances, that I knew, the plan had been to take over Wounded Knee, but they didn't say that. And so the night of the day before the occupation began, it bewildered the FBI that all of a sudden a caravan of cars is going somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And, of course, they were following them by CB radio and all this. I don't think they had helicopters or anything at that point. But they were following them. Agents were following that caravan. And it went to Wounded Knee. They went and... they didn't kill or harm the owners of the trading post or anything there. Wounded Knee was basically, 2 city blocks of, 2 churches. 2 churches for, I don't know how many people lived in the area, but the town itself was, maybe had a population of 60. There was the trading post, there were 2 churches, and maybe 10 houses. But the trading post was large, and that's where most people were housed, and in the churches, when people came. So it shocked everyone. Then that made national news. What didn't make national news were the demands, which were very simple. And, Nixon was president, and he was a fool, because all they wanted were Senate hearings, with one headed by Fulbright from Arkansas, I believe, and another one headed by Ted Kennedy. The Democrats were in power, and they ran the committees. So that's what they wanted. They wanted an impartial review of the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. So it was a hearing on treaties, and then a hearing on just what was going on there at the Pine Ridge Reservation, where the person who was supposed to be impeached, say Nixon. If Nixon was supposed to be impeached, and the person who made that decision was, say, the chairman of the Republican Party, who said, "Oh no, you can keep your job." Well, that's what happened here. And I'm just looking through my book, and it looks like they entered Wounded Knee on the night of the 24th. So February 5th, 25th was the first day there.
And this is when...
And approximately 300 people went in at that time.
Okay.
And then, it got national news right away. So right away, people interested were going. I mean, it grew and grew and grew. People at that point went in overnight, trucked in overnight. This is in the middle of the winter. Not quite as bad as that December snowstorm at Cannonball and Standing Rock, but it was cold. There wasn't much snow on the ground, but it was cold. People would truck in 9 to 10 miles overnight, led by one of our heroes of Wounded Knee, Oscar Bear Runner, who was one of the people who really embodied the spirit of the place. He was 60 years old, but he knew the land, and he would lead every night. At the beginning, the trucks had a few more people, say 15 people overnight would come in. I did speak to someone who was in one of the groups who did not get in. They were caught on the way. His name is John LeGroux. He lives in the Philippines. And, we started as friends because he had been a past president of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, past national president. But, when he was older. But he tried to get inside Wounded Knee, and he was stopped. He was caught. And like him, me at another point, we spoke about our one nights in the Pine Ridge jail. And of course the book was thrown at them. I presume, like me, they took all the money I had and then told them to get off the reservation, drop them at the border, and if you come back here, we'll throw the book at you. And that's how the bullets would come in. I did want to say, for people who think we're going to win a violent revolution, you are nuts. Because for every bullet, they would fire 10,000 bullets inside for every bullet we shot back. That's the amount of firepower they had. Because they immediately surrounded the place, closed all the roadblocks. This is the FBI, the Goon Squad, U.S. Federal Marshals, the U.S. Army was called in, the South Dakota National Guard, this whole array, armored personnel carriers, the whole bit.
I believe even local civilians showed up, too, to take part in this.
Right. People would truck in overnight. Mm. At that point, there was not an easy way to get in. So people generally went to Rapid City to find out what was going on. And that's where they set up, all the trucks. And they were brought to within 9 miles of Wounded Knee, to maybe Wanley, which was another town on the reservation. And then they trek in from there. Most people who came there had already spent 10 hours walking overnight in the cold, carrying backpacks with supplies to bring inside. Food, medical supplies, bullets, and anything else that might have been needed, like my contact lens solution was brought in that way. So I'll talk about maybe daily life quickly inside and just what I was given, people were given assignments. It was like run like, a business or a town, or hell, we were in an army. Certain people cooked at certain places. You were told where you would be sleeping. You were told, if you were in a bunker, what your hours were for that bunker. For the first time in my life, I had arthritis. And I remember, so all these new people had come in. I just wanted to say, we got in easy. The FBI dropped the roadblocks for 3 days, hoping people would leave. About 400 more people drove in, and very few left. So then that really created a standoff. They closed the roadblocks after 3 days, realizing what was going on. 9 of us came from Madison, Wisconsin in a van, and 5 of us stayed for the duration. So around March 9th, the roadblocks were cut off, and then it became a real standoff. And I've mentioned the firepower around, the government array of forces. For me, daily, I asked for physical or accommodation because of disabilities for the first time in my life. And Dennis Banks just looks at me in the eye, and we're sort of sizing each other up. And he says, well, you can be head of security. Me, 24, being head of security for Wounded Knee. But so I ran the security office from 8 to 4 every day. Now, I was not about to make any decisions as head of security. If anything but I was there at the radio. We had a CB ham radio set up with all the bunkers and everything, and the people near the roadblocks. If anything serious came up, either Russell Means or Dennis Banks or Clyde Belcourt would be within 50 yards across the street, and I would just run over and say, there's a problem here, someone has to come, and they would come with me. In my other roles, I mentioned that I knew how to run a printing press, and the next day a printing press appears. So I think everyone says, they were going to go to the Pine Ridge administration building. I think the plan had been all along, and probably before even the decision was made to do something, that if something happened, it was going to happen at Wounded Knee, because the Wounded Knee seemed to be stock-loaded with food, a printing press, whatever could help in a situation like that. So I was basically sitting at a desk, listening to everything. If something came up, I'd run across the street to Russell or Dennis or Clyde, and I ran the printing press. I would type it. It was a Mimeo, those blue stencils. There was a guy there who knew all about the treaties, so every day we would have a Wounded Knee news, or every other day, whenever we could get it together. I think his name was Hank Snow, and he knew all the legal stuff. So we were trying to educate everyone inside about the legal reasons we were there, and why the only thing we were asking for were 2 Senate hearings. And if those 2 Senate hearings had been granted, everyone would have gone home. That is nuts, that Nixon would not allow 2 Senate hearings. And, we want an investigation into the murders of Raymond Yellow Thunder, and there had been 1 or 2 before the occupation. And we wanted an investigation of Richard Wilson, which resulted, that's the 4th thing. The impeachment trial was a folly. And Richard Wilson was still in power. Had the judge been anyone else but his friend, he would have been removed from office. So it's basically the government's fault it wasn't solved right at the beginning.
We only got about 13 minutes left. 13 minutes left, so you want to...
Okay, well, number one of our first people to call, Obama. He shut off his White House phone lines 5 weeks ago. But we do have Twitter. I don't do Twitter, but you Twitter at Barack Obama. And we can still get emails to the White House. You have to go to this website, www.whitehouse.gov/contact. www.whitehouse.gov/contact. So that's for the president. Now let's talk a little more about what went on inside. Inside, it was an egalitarian community. It was, I wouldn't say communism works, but social democracy certainly works. And, no one was getting special treatment. Russell Means and Dennis Banks were eating the same food we were. And there were 2 different kitchens where people ate. A lot of people ate at the famous church on the hill, but there was another church below where primarily local people ate. But I went and ate there because I just felt more comfortable and, got to know people right away, and they were there. So I was mainly hanging with the locals, like Buddy Lamont, who was the first person killed, Gladys Bissonette, Ellen Mooskamp, and others. I want to tell the story of the day I made one big error. I could not believe the amount of responsibility they were giving me. Peopling the security desk, I was in charge of distributing the bullets every morning that Oscar Bear Runner and whoever came with them had trucked in overnight. And I think they let me have that because I try to be as fair as possible. And they must have been able to see inside of me or something. And I was. No one ever complained about me. But I'll never forget the looks on some guys' faces who had guns that weren't they weren't run-of-the-day guns. They needed off bullets. And bullets rarely came in for them. And I'll just never forget the looks on their faces, And then I would run the printing press and type up the stencils for whatever Hank had written up. And that was basically what I did. Everyone sort of had their little job. You'd be in the medical office, you'd be cooking food here, you'd be in a bunker there, and it was all timed. It was pretty well organized inside. I just wanted to call attention to a man named Pedro Bissonette. Pedro Bissonette was the founder of the organization that eventually, called in AIM. It was called the Oglala Sioux Civil Rights Organization. Pedro was the head, and they were part of calling in AIM, and they were, they organized the local thing, which is why I think they had Wounded Knee in mind and had stockpiled stuff there. Plus, they realized the historical significance of Wounded Knee. A lot of people would know what Wounded Knee was, whereas they wouldn't Pine Ridge. I didn't even know what Pine Ridge was. So, Pedro Bissonette. I talked later to Dr. Alan Berkman, who had been inside as a medic for 1 week. Alan founded the group Health Gap, about the gap in health, and South Africa, 5 million people dying there of AIDS. We were both on the board of Health Gap, and then we both found out we were inside of Wounded Knee, and we almost stumbled over the first questions out of both of our mouths. Did you meet Pedro Bissonette? We both agreed that he was the best community organizer we had met in our lives, and believe me, between the both of us, we had met plenty. Pedro went up to each individual, when he caught them, so it could just be the two of them, asked them about themselves, and thanked them personally for coming to Wounded Knee. I don't know of any organizer who would ever have done that. And he had such a soft demeanor, but he had been a Golden Gloves boxer. But in the Peter Matheson book, Pedro gets 2 paragraphs in the whole book. Dennis Banks called him the soul of Wounded Knee, which it certainly was, but I could kill myself for not going back out there and writing a book on him. He was murdered 6 months later in October of 1973. And I called up my friend Anita in Milwaukee, who had also been there. And I said, they've just murdered Pedro. You want to go? And she just dropped everything. She came to Madison. We hitchhiked out to Pine Ridge. It's about 600 miles. This is our dedication to Pedro. I don't think I'd do it for anybody else. And we got there just as the service was starting. And then we went where Gladys was, and she found us places to stay. I happened to be going to my place 5 minutes after 10. There was a curfew. I was arrested and spent the night in jail. The one call I made, I tried to sound as important as possible. Call the mayor, call this, call that. And the next morning, the trial was, they took all the money I had, put me on the edge of the reservation in rain, wind, cold, and in the middle of a war zone. I'm sitting there. Who's going to stop first? Had my thumb on it, car pulls up, a window rolls down, and Gladys Bissonette laughing and said, I thought we'd find you here. Would you like a ride to Rapid City? So that's my story. Leonard Peltier was not as lucky.
Yeah.
Leonard was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And believe me, those who were there in the aftermath of Wounded Knee, inside Wounded Knee, we had 500 other people who were there with us. We didn't, by no means did we ever feel alone. And, everyone was like brothers and sisters. But in the aftermath, Wilson just went after people, individual after individual after individual. You did not know where he would move next, who he would fire next, whose house he would burn down next, or who he would kill next. But the main one after this trial, when we win this trial, which we will, I want the FBI investigated for those 100 murders, especially the murder of Pedro Bissonette. He had to be marked. After this is done, I, for one, am not through. I want justice done for everyone on all accords, not just Leonard. Leonard probably realizes that he could have been killed that day, as Joe Stuntz was. And, of course, Leonard is charged with murder, while the killing of the Indian, Joe Stuntz, never investigated. That's the difference.
Mm.
So inside life was pretty normal. A high point was the day
John,
about 20 people.
We've only got 4 minutes left. We've only got 4 minutes left. So what do you want to leave us with?
Contact.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do another show afterwards.
No, we will. I'm going to call you during the week.
Okay.
We'll tape another hour.
After Leonard is free. But let me get you the contacts. So we have the president, at Barack Obama, for those who do Twitter. I'm 68 and I don't. And the White House mail, you have to go to their website, www.whitehouse.gov/contact. Now, we have contacted the offices of Jerry Brown. And I've known Jerry Brown, as an acquaintance since, when he ran for president, he wore the red ribbons. Now, who do you think, why did he do that? Could it be because I was one of the people around him and had AIDS? And when he ran for mayor 2 years later, in between that time, I would say 1990 and running for president and wearing the red ribbons around that time, Leonard's book, Prison Writings, came out. And Jerry Brown attended the event for the release of Prison Writings. And I even remember who he went with, to tell you the truth. So we are concentrating on Jerry Brown. His phone number is 1-916-445-2841. That's 1-916-445-2841. And if people don't catch these, you can call me at home, 510-667-6617, 510-667-6617. So it's at Jerry Brown, or at Jerry Brown Gov, at Jerry Brown Gov, G-O-V, is his Twitter, at Jerry Brown Gov. And then the phone number, 916-445-2841. We have a strong presence in Minnesota, so we are also asking people to contact the government or the governor of Minnesota, Mark Dayton, because we figure if Jerry Brown comes through, then we're going to ask the Democratic Governors Association to ask for clemency as a group, because that grouping of Democrats, of official Democratic parties, is the most likely to come on board, because when the Scott Walker recount happened, they were the only national Democratic group that gave money. I'm trying to look these up on my computer.
Well,
okay,
let me give the number for
Mark Dayton and Jerry Brown also have Facebook pages. The Dayton one, you just put Governor Mark Dayton, and it will show. And his Twitter is Gov Mark Dayton, no spaces, G-O-V, capital G, Mark, M-A-R-K, capital M, Dayton, D-A-Y-T-O-N.
Okay, John, we're out of time. Yeah. One more phone number is Loretta Lynch, 1-202-353-1555. You can find all these numbers. I'm going to have them for you on the OppermanReport.com website. They're going to be in the YouTube comments and in the Spreaker comments. You can find them all there. I'm also going to mention all these numbers again tomorrow. At the end of the show, we have tomorrow afternoon, we have a King Tone from the Imperial Latin Kings is coming on tomorrow. And he was actually friends. He met Leonard Peltier in prison down there in Florida. And he's going to be telling us about his experience. Yeah, he's going to tell us about his experience. Because, Leonard was like an old head, meeting this young guy in prison. He was giving him advice. So we're going to have King Tone on tomorrow. And in the last we'll definitely mention all these numbers again tomorrow. John Iverson, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. And I want to call you this week. We can tape another to fill up the rest of this story, okay, to finish it off. Thank you so much, brother.
Wonderful. And I'm going to try to get you, for future shows, some people who lived there then and live there now, to just get the local angle from, people who partook and how things have changed or how they haven't changed.
Excellent, John. Thank you so much. We'll talk during the week, okay? Thank you. Good night. Okay, there you got John Iverson, slow talker. Okay, but I love him. That guy's been up all week. He's been working on this all week. Coming up next is Pierce Redmond with his interview with Doug Valentine. Doug Valentine. I wonder how I found Doug Valentine. It was very